you are a finance analyst or a business owner who has to manage finance audit controls and you are still spending hours in Excel and playing email ping pong when performing user access reviews, I'm going to show you exactly how I automated 90% of the work required and some of the surprising side effects we saw when doing so. Hi, I'm Adam from Evolved Automation and I will be guiding you on your way to automation mastery today. So get a cup of tea or coffee and let's dive in. For organisations to remain compliant, build trust with users and build strong security measures, they have to ensure they are checking that all users to sensitive systems have the access required for their role, nothing more and nothing less. The reason behind this is because sometimes users may carry over access levels or approval limits from their old role, and this would put them in a position where they're able to access sensitive information which they don't need anymore, or they could even be in a situation where they can commit fraud. To minimise the risk of this happening, routine housekeeping is performed and all line managers of these users must look at the access they have each month or quarter and then either say, yeah, I approve, that looks good, or hang on a minute, they shouldn't be able to see that or do that, I reject it and here's why. So, before we start looking at how we transform the finance team's processes, it's crucial we spend a few minutes observing the manual process which was being followed just to make it really clear how beneficial the automated process is. The process was split into 3 main stages, and I'll be going through the old and new process for each stage. For those who want to talk systems, stage 1 was automated mainly using Power Query and Excel, and then stage 2 and 3 were mostly automated using Power Automate by Microsoft. So let's begin. So let's talk about the first stage, which I like to call spreadsheet mayhem. And the finance analyst, we'll call them Jill, first compiled a list of all finance system users with their responsibilities, which was basically their access level of the system, and their approval limits across multiple ledgers. These approval limits are often very high and they are a sum of money which the user can approve up to without having to consult anyone else. Okay, so this may sound easy, however this step alone used to take 7 hours to complete. Why? Because Jill had to combine 3 separate reports to get this data set. An all-user report, which provided a list of 400 users, a line manager report, which has details of that person's line manager, and then a separate approval limits report, which has each user's approval limits. Okay, so you can see where this could get a little bit messy. And to keep it brief, there was no way of using a VLOOKUP to match the user's approval limits data from report 3 and then link it with report 1, because there was no shared employee ID number. A nightmare. So this required Jill to manually change how the name was displayed in one report so it matched up with the name in report 1. This also meant that they couldn't guarantee the approval limits were actually from that person because they could have belonged to someone else with the same name. So the data accuracy there was not great. My assessment at this stage was there was a lot of time being spent manually manipulating data in Excel and the accuracy of that data was still not even 100% at the end of it. So how do we change it? Let's look at the new and improved version of that stage, which essentially is getting your data set together. It's gone from 7 hours to 5 minutes, okay? So in short, after talking to the right people, we now have a report available for Jill to download at any time, which gives her the exact data in the format she needs, without the need of joining reports together. Interestingly, I only found this was possible after using Power Query to automate all the actions Jill was manually doing. So on the downside, I spent a day doing something that we didn't use, but on the plus side, I'm more experienced with Power Query and I now use what I've learned in other processes. So 7 hours of work has turned into 5 minutes. The data is now 100% accurate. The line manager, access levels and approval limits all definitely align correctly to each user. Gold star. In terms of the lessons learned from this, no work is wasted. So even though I didn't use my Power Query automation for this, that's helped me in other areas. Number 2, the second lesson is it's important to know the right people, right? We would not have got this report if we had not started talking about what we were doing. And I showed the data engineer who ended up providing this report what I'd done in Power Query, and they said, well, there's no need to even do that. I can get a report for you, which does it all, directly from the data source. So perfect. And probably the biggest lesson that I've learned is number 3, ask different people. Okay, so these issues that Jill was having around the reports and the data accuracy within the process had been questioned previously in the team. However, they were told it wasn't possible. So it turns out it was. We were just not asking the right people. If you think something should be possible, usually around data available in reports, etc., ask around and you will probably get different answers from different people. Now, Jill has the list of all the finance users, the details they need to review, and the line manager who needs to review them. Perfect. Jill would then manually send that spreadsheet to all the line managers, asking them to approve or decline their employees' access and approval limits. Okay, so each of the 150 line managers would then reply at different times, either saying approve or reject, and if reject, a reason for rejection. Jill would respond by either going back into the spreadsheet and marking this as approve manually, or they would mark as reject and adjust or remove the access stated by the line manager. So say, I was rejected because I had inherited some access from my previous role, Jill would then go in and remove that access. Now, as you can imagine, Jill will have been in and out of that spreadsheet more times than she'd have liked over the course of 3 months. Any other work they would have been doing at the time would have been interrupted, and that would have taken her time to context switch back to it after marking those responses. Not great in terms of productivity for her or for the company. My assessment at this stage was, again, too much time spent manually working in Excel. Also, all of the approval line managers could see the approval limits for everyone. So it's not posing too much of a risk, but it's also not following the minimum access required principle, which just basically means like people shouldn't see any more than they need to do their job. The third point is that the response rate often landed at around 60%. So not all managers responded due to a lack of any real repercussions of them not responding. If they ignored the email, nothing would happen. So a lot of them didn't respond. So how do we change this? What does the new and improved process look like? Here is where things get a little bit juicier. Okay, so we built 2 Power Automate flows to enable this stage of the process and a third to enable the next. Allow me to break it down. The first Power Automate flow copied all of the data from that data set that we got from the new report, and they copied it to something called a SharePoint list. For those that don't know, a SharePoint list is like a spreadsheet in the cloud which responds better to automated processes amongst other things. Okay, so just think of it as like a bit of a fancy spreadsheet. Once the data has copied over, a second flow is now run, which sends approval requests out through Microsoft Teams and Outlook in an email to all line managers, 1 per employee. So if you line manage 4 staff and they all have access to the finance system, you will get 4 separate approval requests. As each line manager then responds, those that respond with approve, the SharePoint list automatically updates to mark it as approved with a timestamp as well. And it ends up completing the row as well, indicating that no further action needs to be taken. Perfect. If they respond with reject, they also leave the comment outlining what they want done with the access. This is updated onto the SharePoint list as well, ready for Jill to action. And it sends an email to Jill to let her know. So Jill can process all of these rejected ones in bulk, or she can do it as and when if she's free. What improvements have we seen here? So 10 hours of work has roughly turned into 1 hour. No more interrupting other work for Jill, which is great. She can kind of like crack on with the work without being interrupted. The line managers only see the data for their employees, so no one else's, and this aligns with the principle of minimum required access. Jill now only has to take action on the rejected users. Her attention is focused and the tasks can be performed in bulk if required. What are the lessons learned from this? So one, probably the most obvious, is leveraging automation, approval systems and process improvements can make things quicker, cheaper, and you get better results. So that brings us swiftly onto the third and final stage of our process. What did that look like? So after 2 weeks, Jill would then send a reminder emails to those line managers who hadn't responded. And the repercussions should be that if they didn't respond, the employee and user will lose all access to the finance system, and it would need to be requested again through the standard request process, right? However, when enforcing this in the past, the finance system received feedback that this had a knock-on detrimental effect to the business and hindered their work streams. This meant that the finance team weren't really clear on whether they should be removing access or not. More on this later. My assessment here was, again for the third time, a lot of time spent in Excel digging out those people who hadn't responded and sending emails manually, and an overall lack of clarity on process, deadlines and repercussions, leading to a low engagement rate and confusion over why the user access review was even taking place in the first place. So looking at this issue here, removing users' access can disrupt a team's workload, but failing to enforce audit controls can also lead to overprescription of system access, which puts the company at risk of fraud being committed, other than other things. So what does the new improved process look like? What are we looking at? After 10 days into the 14-day response period have passed, a third Power Automate flow is run, which sends a reminder email to both the line manager and the user this time, reminding them both that the user's access will be removed if there is no response from the line manager in the next 4 days. This is a very simple but effective final flow, which now alerts the user. So if their line manager is out of office or they're ignoring us, they now know to escalate to someone more senior to contact the finance team for approval. What are the improvements we made in here? So Jill no longer has to isolate those who didn't respond and manually send an email. Repercussions for not responding are now clear and notified to the user and the line manager. Response rate has now improved due to the clarity of the process to both the users and the line managers, and also it's easier to use via Teams and email. So I hope now that you have a better understanding of how automation can be used to save time and money while assisting companies to complete those necessary tasks. There are 2 main takeaways that I want you to take from this, okay? So the first one is things aren't always too good to be true. Whether you're a finance analyst or a business owner, it's that sometimes these results can sound too good to be true, right? And you might be asking, what's the catch? Oftentimes the catch is the work that you put in up front. So if you do that to analyze, improve, and automate a process, you will most likely get something that works quicker, cheaper, and with better results. Literally no downside. The important part is committing some resource to take time off the operational stuff so you can automate it. And I hear this all too often, we're too busy. If you're too busy to work on your processes, you would have more time if you worked on your processes. Okay, it's the automation avoidance paradox, TM, I see many companies struggle with. Don't let it be you. Automating a process allows you to define it. So this is the second thing that I want you to take away today. Oftentimes, when I've been asked to automate a process, I start digging and I realize there isn't a complete process there to begin with. Like, there isn't anything to automate. In this instance, repercussions weren't properly defined or actions, and some things were time-bound when other ones were not. Okay, so automating a process requires you to define the process in the first place. What will happen and when, and you can have conditional statements in that. The main benefit from this is that it allows the business time and headspace to review what they want to achieve from the process while making it quicker and cheaper. Now they get defined outcomes under defined conditions at pre-agreed times, and that improves consistency and accountability. All that good stuff that auditors love, and for good reason too, right? So on that note, if you have a similar process or even a completely different business process you'd like to automate, or if you have any business problems at all that you'd like to work through, please leave a comment below and we'd love to chat. Thanks for watching and see you later.